Yeah, so that's also um, clear from it's clear to see that the tension is rising, and it's also like the film It Follows, where she's running away and the music becomes a lot more harsh, and it becomes a higher, louder volume as well. So then looking at Bird Box, we were looking at Bird Box and we saw the scene where there was really like a loud voice in her head, and it made her really confused. And we like this to make the killer seem like more on edge and a bit unaware of his surroundings, and it can add to like the rest of like making them want to watch on. So we added a sound with the word help as the title, and it's just sounding like it's coming from his head and he's hitting his head, not knowing what to do. So that sounds like this. It's also quite an unclear sound, as you can't make out what he's completely saying, so it kind of makes you kind of want to watch on to find out what's being said. And yeah. So when looking at the titles, we had quite a lot of research to do to make sure the titles added to the horror kind of genre and not take away. So when we first looked at the designs, we first decided to look at we looked on the Daft Point website as we could download that, and we looked at the Young Frank font, which we'd like to have jagged edges like added to the horror film, but we also came to the conclusion that it was too generic and it ended up taking away from the suspense and the horror and kind of already told, like it just became a bit cheesy for us. But then we went a bit more simple and we looked at just a simple line font that you can see, and we decided it was too plain and also took away from horror, as it just was too generic for all films, and just didn't add anything. So then our final one that we decided to choose was Stranger Back in the Night, and we really liked it because it was edgy, like it was like kind of like like jagged edges with like writing of like, we thought it could symbolise blood, the way it's like draped across with the T and things like that, and we decided to put it in the colour red, which is quite like symbolises the blood, and like kind of the horror, the gore, which is quite also stereotypical, which you can see we took a lot of our inspiration from Insidious, as it was red and had similar font, but was also different. Our font's less bold, as we didn't want it to be standing out as much, but we also figured that it needed to become bigger. We started off having it quite small in the edges, and it, with research and audience told us that they'd like it bigger and more bold, so that's what we did. We also had to look at where and when we wanted the titles, and we decided we wanted it with the movement. One, this gave us more time to add action behind the titles, but it also kind of flowed with our piece, and also added in places we had titles, it added more relaxedness because they weren't focusing as much on the action, and then where we didn't have the titles, it was more like jump scares, like important bits that we didn't want the audience to miss. So we took a lot of our the ordering of our titles from things such as Halloween title sequence, which you can see there, and then we made our own. We chose and picked what roles we wanted to have out and when we wanted them, and we put the actors first, as that was the norm for horror films, and yeah. And our main title of the film, Help, we had really big at the end, and it came in and faded out at the end, after the man running in like full screen, which also had a different font to the rest to make it stand out, a lot bigger, and it had two different colours of red to make it stand out. So for the editing, we looked at finding editing that would support the horror and get people wanting to watch on. So when looking at lots of different films, we decided that match and action was used a lot, and we used it during the opening when we hear the scream. We decided that it allows people to see different angles and different views, such as like seeing someone's face to getting the camera to track someone while running, and also quicken the paces. Like you can fasten the pace when you decide to change angles more regularly, and it becomes more tense, and it adds to the suspense. It also increases the continuity, making it more realistic, because the match and action we used was with the 180-degree rule, and you saw when the changes, the cuts were made accurately. The 180-degree rule was also used throughout our piece. This was also to keep the continuity, and this just allowed it to be more realistic and more easy to watch and understand. So for the match and action, the influence we took from the film It, where he's running and then he suddenly bangs his head, and it kind of just changed the tone in that film, which we enjoyed watching. So then we used it in ours. We also took the 180-degree rule from Insidious, where it kind of builds the tension there as they're looking for a baby, and you see all the different angles in the 180 degrees, which is quite useful, which we took from that as well. Montage editing. So we used this to introduce a new character of the killer, and to kind of intrigue the audience to who he was, because no one saw his face until the last shot. So you saw his feet, you saw the blood, the dagger, which was different aspects. And then it finally built up to his face as we had a panning shot all the way up to his face. This kind of just builds up the character, makes a big stigma out of the character, and it also makes the audience want to watch on and see the last shot of his face. And you still don't, even with seeing his face, you still don't know who he is, what type of person he is, and what he's done and what he's going to do. So it kind of intrigues the audience. So we used jump cuts quite a lot. This was also used in Annabelle. So in Annabelle, they had a scene when they were looking for I think they were looking for their baby, and they were running away from the doll, and it kind of blacks out and comes black out to colour again. And this we really liked, because it kind of scared the audience, as they didn't know what was happening, as the characters didn't know what was happening. And so we decided to use this with a final cut. We added in blackouts to the shot of the trees, panning outwards. It kind of added interest, and there was also sound in the background building up tension, as we didn't know what it was going to go into. So the audience were kind of waiting to see what was going to happen next. So the mise en scene was really important during our film because it really helped us to develop the idea of having a horror and scare the audience. So the first shot was the forest, and we decided that the mise en scene around this was kind of the unknown, a typical forest, like it's quite scary. This was also seen in The Shining, as it was an opening shot, and people kind of relate the forest to being lost, being scared, like if we're in trouble. So we kind of had that to set the scene, and then the mise en scene for the two characters